Kainga is a real-time strategy game developed by Erik Rempen, who started working on it 3 years ago. When Erik started, he had no game development experience. Now, 3 years later, he just launched a Kickstarter, which is, as the recording of this intro, almost fully funded and still has about 15 days to go. So it's looking very good. And we just had a chat about his journey, the lessons he learned along that path, and I hope that you guys learn a lot from it. Yo, what's up, Erik? Welcome to the show.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Well, we live in completely different time zones, so what is it for you?
It's the afternoon. It's about 4 in the afternoon.
For me, it's actually, I guess theoretically still morning. It's 11 a.m. here.
Right.
So yeah, for people who don't know you, like where are you right now?
Yeah, I'm actually in Thailand, in Bangkok. I've been living here about 8 years, and it's a good place to live. I'm not Thai. I was born in the U.S., but I'm quite happy here.
It was really cool. There's like this new Netflix series I've been watching. I don't know what it's called in English, but it's like about this like guy who goes around in like Thailand and Bangkok, and he like drugs tourists and he does all this crazy stuff. So it looks really beautiful. Not that the stuff he's doing is good, but Thailand just looks amazing. Like, so I'm definitely jealous.
It is. It has a lot of postcard moments.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. I definitely want to go to Thailand as well, but let's not get too carried away there.
Right.
You're in the middle of something really exciting. You're developing a game called Kainga. It's on Kickstarter right now, actually, so people can back that. But yeah, like tell us a little bit about like how you got started there with developing that game.
Yeah, so Kainga's, like you said, I just launched a Kickstarter, which is pretty exciting. It's a big milestone. It's something I had in the plan from a long time ago. So I started this project about, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago. And it was, I kind of went through all the steps of development. I'm on my own here, and I had to teach myself how to do programming and learn everything about game design to get to this point. And it's kind of been quite a battle, but I'm really happy with the results so far.
Yeah, it looks incredible. Like for people who've not seen it, personally, I really noticed it from like Reddit, where you shared some posts. It's like a really unique art style, 2D kind of mixed with 3D blend. Massive creatures. There's kind of like inspiration from, I guess, like tribal kind of historic elements in there as well. Mm-hmm. Really cool. Like, can you tell us, like, take us back maybe 3 years back? What kind of ignited that desire to actually make a game? Given that you I don't think you have like last time we spoke, you mentioned that you didn't have like a background in anything gaming related. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I guess, I don't know. It's kind of an artistic pull to try something new in one way. At the time, I was working as a graphic designer and a painter, like an old school painter. And I thought there was this game that I used to play when I was a really young child called Populous, the beginning. And some people who see the art that I've done will probably recognize that. And I've always wanted there to be a sequel to that game. Not that this is, but it's inspired by it partly. Also, I played a lot of city builders. This is a city builder game, for those that don't know. It's a bit of a strategy game. And I was always a big fan of them, like Civilization or Age of Empires, but they always kind of like drove you down the same path of development. Every time you played Age of Empires, it was like, okay, build 2 houses, build a barracks, build an archery range in that order. I mean, there's a little bit of deviation, but I kind of wanted to play a game that was a lot more diverse, so that when you played it, every time was a surprise. What was going to happen? How you could develop to adapt to your environment. And since that kind of game doesn't exist, as far as I know, I decided, fine, I'll make it myself.
Yeah, that sounds like. I mean, that sounds like kind of reminds me of the Stardew Valley story. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but like it's pretty much the same backstory. I think in that case it was like Harvest Moon, where he was waiting for a sequel, or he wanted to play a sequel, and he just kind of started making that game. And obviously, that was a huge success story. So, uh, let's hope that we can repeat it here with Kainga. Definitely sounds like a really interesting premise because obviously there's like you said, there's like that interesting mechanic, I think, of needing to make the player adapt to something new every time by giving them not really the predictability of what is the map going to look like. I think that's also procedurally generated in your game, if I believe.
Yeah, yeah.
And like the technology trees as well, like you said.
Yeah, so the technology tree is all procedurally generated. It could be completely different each time, and that kind of pushes the player in an odd direction. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of, when people play it for the first time, it does kind of put you upside down. You're like, wait a minute, I don't know what the best option is. And that's kind of the point, is to break you out of that mold of there is no best option every time. You kind of have to learn something new, try out new ideas.
Interesting.
Yeah, and by accident, the game kind of developed into a roguelite as well. So it kind of adopted that genre through the procedural generation, through the permanence. And so Kainga became the roguelite village builder.
So kind of one thing I find is really cool is just listening to like developers when they start, is like, especially when when they've never gotten into like game development before, just making their first game. I kind of like to speak about like the kind of journey from like learning, from going really to zero to kind of learning and becoming more, self-sufficient. Like, how did you approach that? How did you really get started? What was your kind of approach? Like, what did you learn first? Coding, art, and can you walk us like through that if you still kind of remember how you did that?
Yeah, and I get asked this a lot. Like, there are a lot of solo developers out there in the world who are trying to follow along the same path. And it is, I have to say, the beginning was an extremely difficult time trying to figure out the answers to my questions and trying to figure out what I didn't know. Like some questions you don't know how to ask because you don't know what you don't know yet. It's really hard. Like, but the way I did it was just one step at a time, like making smaller tasks. Like, instead of saying, I want to create a resource management system, you just start with something like, I want to be able to click on something and know what it is, or it tells me what resource that is. It just bite-sized chunks. So I did start with Unreal Engine before all the 3D and 2D modeling, and kind of built this rudimentary base building game. And then as more pieces were needed, they got added in. So, I got tired of looking at cubes, so I worked a little bit in Blender for a little bit of 3D modeling. But again, I didn't teach myself all the ins and outs of every software, because each one is incredibly deep. So I just kind of taught myself what I needed to know at the time, and then improved on it later.
I think this is a great approach for, especially someone who, like you said, is like a solo developer, kind of more focused on the end product than perhaps like someone who's trying to get a job in the industry. You don't really need to be an expert to get, I would say, like at least acceptable result in a specific area. And if it needs that kind of like next level polish, you can always like hire someone who does like a little bit here and there for, some special art asset in your game that needs to look really amazing.
Yeah.
Especially when you're using a tool like Unreal Engine, which, out of the box just has some great graphics there.
Yeah, it definitely helped a lot. Like, just being able to not have to calculate light. That's a huge bonus to using one of the tools at hand. And the tools at hand are really good. Unity and Unreal are incredible. The Godot, or I don't know how to pronounce it.
Godot, it's a big debate, I think, actually. How do you even say it? But
yeah. And YouTube is an endless supply of information. And it is amazing. Like every question you have, you just type it into Google, and somebody else has already been asked it, and someone else has answered it.
Yeah, totally. It's incredible time. Yeah, with this like kind of power and accessibility just at our fingertips for free as well. Like it's crazy. It's even like, I almost feel sorry for. I don't know if you heard about this, but there's like this other company, game engine company called Buildbox that are like now getting they're getting like criticized for their like trying to raise the revenue cut and whatnot. But it's crazy because like, if I was going to build like a game engine company, I'd also be worried about money, but like Unity and Unreal, they're not. Like they're just giving it out for free, and it blows my mind, kind of this industry, like that all this stuff is available for free.
How big it is! I've read that the video game industry is bigger than movies and music combined.
Wow,
Yeah,
it's crazy. I think a lot of that is also like a bit maybe hidden from us as well, because I think a lot of that's mobile as well, and maybe that's not something that we personally are too focused on.
Yeah.
Or at least I got focused on it last year a little bit, but it is something that like, that isn't, you think all the free games in mobile, oh, like they can't be making that much money, but they're making a lot of money. So
Yeah.
it's crazy. So you kind of taught yourself all this kind of development stuff. Just saying, like you said, just kind of doing it as you went along. Did you have like some kind of roadmap or game design document or something that helped you kind of figure out what your vision was, how far you needed to go down a particular road, or was that also something you kind of developed as you went along?
I do now. I have a pretty strict roadmap that I'm keeping to. It's like on a month by month basis that goes up until the end of 2022. But when I started, I'm far too organized, I think. When I started, it was just kind of weekly goals or something that I wanted to see happen. I just put it in a list. And then as I did them, I just checked off those lists, which is incredibly satisfying. And I kind of made a rule for myself, what I called it no zero days, where every day I would work on something, whether it was, drawing a little bit or just a bit of programming, a bit of 3D modeling or whatever. Every day I would do at least 15 minutes of working on the project. And that kind of keeps the flow going quite well, because you'd be surprised after, 3 months of 15 minutes, it really adds up. I think persistence is really the key here, because 3 years is an incredible amount of time. And it was very slow growth in the beginning, but over time, I think it adds up. And I think if you stick to that, you stick to your same project over that long period of time, it's going to end up good. But I think a lot of mistakes people make are, having a great idea and then having another great idea and then not knowing which one to do and bouncing back and forth, which I never had. I kind of just said, this is what I want to make. This is how it's going to look like. This in my mind. This is what it's going to feel like. And I just spent all my energy to build towards that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that 0 day principle, like having some kind of accountability system.
Yeah.
Even if it's just something like doing something really basic. It's great advice. Like, how did you kind of, you said there that I think you were like doing this full time. You were working as a graphic designer and painter. How did you kind of balance that with your kind of game development? Are there any like tips that you would give to someone who's trying to maybe do the same thing, as like many solo developers I think are trying to do exactly that?
Yeah, I think it's, at least for me, I found a lot of success in cutting corners.
Right.
And by that, I don't mean making it crappy. I just mean that, like, cut out the things that are not absolutely necessary, but all the parts that need to be there, work on that. Like, for example, my animations are four frames long, because that's as many as I could. That's the minimum I could have for an animation, like a running animation.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it could easily double that and make it 8, and it would look a lot smoother. But it doesn't really, it doesn't need that for the feel that the game's going for. So yeah, just focus. I guess I don't know. It's hard. Working full time and then also doing game development is something that if it's not fun, then I wouldn't recommend it because it's a lot of work. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's actually a fantastic piece of advice. I think is like, I think we already touched upon it. Like, don't try to kind of be a perfectionist. Don't try to go too deep into one topic. Like, I guess if you're like an artist, like professional VFX artist or whatever, you might be like focused super hard on like some particles in the game or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're making an indie game, that's not going to really carry. You need to kind of have like a little bit of everything to kind of carry your game up and have like a minimum level of quality in all areas.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like that one amazing particle system or animation, whatever, isn't really going to make people like your game if like the art, the gameplay isn't just that fun. So yeah, I love that, like cutting corners, spreading out, maybe thinking about like in your art style, how can you cut some corners as well in terms of how can you choose an art style that looks really appealing and maybe saves you some time. Is that kind of what you did when you went for the sort of paper art style as well? Can you tell us like a little bit about that and some of the, challenges and things you experimented with when you were working on that?
Yeah, actually, this is one of the things that I would not budge on in terms of the art design. I really wanted these 2D characters in a 3D world. And Unreal Engine is not built for that. It's built for 3D characters in a 3D world or 2D in a 2D world, obviously. So this is something that I really banged my head against for a long time, trying to figure out how to get it to work.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I wanted to go for that art style is kind of because it was, I think there's a lot of retro nostalgia that people will see in that and appreciate. But it was quite difficult to kind of get the animations to work, make them always face the camera, depending on no matter what direction they're facing the characters. And then having a rotating camera as well added another layer of complexity.
Yeah, it is. I think like from our last interview, you also mentioned that you actually made the monsters like 3D because of that, because you were having like challenges of like making them in 2D and yeah, I think like that's like a recurring pattern I've seen from talking to game developers who do this kind of 2D and 3D. There's always some more challenge than you think it is, but I think in the end, it can save you a lot of time if you really do it right, because obviously 3D is always harder.
Yeah.
Usually not always harder, but it adds a lot more complexity, especially when you're working on it by yourself.
But when it comes to animation, 3D is easier, in my opinion, because you do an animation once and it's good. But for 2D, I have to do it 8 times for each angle. That's
true. And also, like, if you can use like Miximo, I don't know if you know that. It's like a website where you can download pre-made animations, and they're very high quality, but they're mainly made for like humanoid characters, not necessarily the monsters that you would be using in your game, but definitely really important if you're making that kind of game.
Yeah, that's something I would recommend is use placeholder art as much as you can, like at least when you're starting out, just to create a game that's fun, even if it looks like halfway between all these different art styles. If it's fun, it'll show quite quickly.
Yeah, did you do like play tests or show the game to people and make them play it? Maybe, like, can you tell us a little bit about that? How you decided if it was fun?
I did actually, and it was not fun for a long time. People thought I was crazy. They're like, "Oh yeah, okay, this is okay," but I don't get it. And I think it only recently it became something that was fun to do, and it's because city builders require a lot of influences to be interesting. Like building a small town is fun for 5 seconds, but it's the challenges and it's the imperative of failing that makes it fun. So it took some time before the game was actually fun, and I did have to change a lot there were a lot of versions where the camera would be stuck to the main character, the thinker, and by moving WASD, it would walk him around. And then I had another version where you would have him walk up to different items in the world, and then he would come up with technology based on that. Just a lot of crazy ideas that I would try out and then show to my brother, and he would say, I don't get it. And then I'd have to change it and improve it.
Is it mainly, friends and family that were testing the game, or did you maybe try and organize like a little test play group or do it online or something like this?
It was mainly family. Yeah. My friends are actually, none of them are into video games at all.
Right.
So to them, it's like, they don't even know the WASD move keys. But my family really helps, my brothers especially. And I did end up doing an alpha test with a really early build online with a bunch of people on my Discord. And they seemed to really enjoy it, even though it was a terrible, buggy mess. That really, really helped. Just having people say, look, this doesn't work. I was trying to do this, but couldn't happen. And other than that, I would say watching people play it is actually really beneficial as well.
Definitely. I think it's really important because you can see, especially if you're doing like an in-person test, I think you can kind of see like when the person reaction, like, like when they really like something, you can see it on their face. Like, this really triggered them and they didn't get this. Like you said, that's really important, especially if you're trying to I think like the first seconds are really important as well. Was that something you experienced in your playtest? Is like, if they don't get it right away or they don't have some kind of positive experience at the beginning, then, like the retention, like the amount of players who will continue playing or will enjoy the rest of the experience is like much less if they can't get into it, if that makes sense.
If it's frustrating in the beginning, then it's not going to be fun.
Exactly.
And I think this is probably a bigger challenge for platformers.
Right.
This is why the platformer genre, I think, is particularly difficult to crack into, is because it's either boring or frustrating. Those are the two initial feelings, in my opinion, for a lot of first-time platformers that haven't really sorted out their balance yet.
So true. Yeah. It's very hard to get that like magic on the player where they're like, this is something really fresh to them. Like you said, like it's either you kind of nailed it there, boring or frustrating. I think it's a great way.
Yeah, it is something I'm having a bit of trouble with because like the animals in the game in Kainga are really weird and really large, which is kind of unusual, and people want to play with that. But I'm having a bit of trouble kind of making them more a part of the gameplay within like in a way that makes sense.
Right.
So they are there, but it's not a necessity to involve them in your game, which I guess is fine as well.
Yeah, I guess like one thing you could kind of introduce that maybe like get the player excited is maybe have like a really early game creature or something like that, something that they can use right at the beginning of the game and familiarize them with. But I don't know if this is something you're already doing. I haven't played the alpha yet, so still waiting to get my hands on the game.
Coming soon, yeah.
Exactly, coming soon. So let's get right into that discussion as well. Like, last time we spoke, so for people who don't know, on the blog we have like a post as well from our last discussion, which was actually I think not exactly, but like about a year ago.
Wow.
And we were talking about as well, like, what were your plans? Like, how are you going to maybe approach the future with Kainga? And I think one of the things you mentioned was Kickstarter, which is what you ended up going with.
Yeah.
And I think you're the first person I'm interviewing about Kickstarter specifically, about game development. It's like, tell us about how you approach that. How did you think like Kickstarter would be a great fit for your game? And how you started just organizing that.
Yeah, I think it was kind of a part of the plan from the beginning. It took a little bit longer to get to that point than I expected by a few months. But I chose Kickstarter because I think it's a really good way to build a community and get a lot of people excited about it at the same time. But to be honest, I think I didn't expect how much of a sour mood there is for video gamers for Kickstarter. I get a lot of people who say like, "Oh, I would back this, but I promised myself I would never do another Kickstarter." I think, yeah, which is interesting. I think for things like board games, it's a much more open community. But I think that because video games take so long to make, a lot of people feel burned from Kickstarter. But I think it's been really helpful so far. I mean, we're only 2-3 days in at the time of recording, and it's looking good. And I'm really happy with the amount of growth in the community so far. And I think this game particularly benefits from community involvement. I mean, all games would on a marketing sense, but this one is great because I could come up with some crazy ideas for technologies and then get the community to vote on which one I should add in, and they can, be involved in the development of the game. Where
Totally.
if it's more linear, if it's a story-driven game, that may not be as easy.
Yeah, that's true because you don't want to spoil it, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think you made a great point there, and really interesting observation I made as well is like Kickstarter seems to be less and less about kind of really what it was about initially, which was helping people fund their game, and more about like kind of marketing as well.
Right.
For me, it also seems like like a lot of people are using it kind of in that way, is like they want like to get a bit more exposure through Kickstarter as well. The money helps obviously, and like validating the idea, seeing if people are willing to pay money for it is a great way to do that, right?
Yeah.
Of course, but yeah.
I think it's changed over time. Like when Kickstarter started, it was an idea. Somebody would say, "Hey, I have an idea for a video game. Do you want to help me make it?" And now I think that doesn't fly. I think the only reason why the game's going well is because it's almost like it looks great. You can play it. It's almost done. Just lacks content. But if I had launched my Kickstarter a year ago when we last spoke, I don't think people would have gone for it as much because of the way that it looked and felt. I think people are looking for nearly finished products to jump on board.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly how it is. And it's kind of weird because it's completely, it's not really funding anymore so much. Like, you're giving someone a bit of money in advance, but it's a little bit like a pre-order, I guess, more these days. But I think that makes sense because, like you said, like if you give me $200,000 for an idea, let's say, for me to build it, I don't know if the motivation would be there, as opposed to if I got my funding from like institutional investors or like getting a loan from the bank, where I know that if I don't actually make the product and it's good, I'm going to have some kind of repercussion, if that makes sense.
It's also about the time. Like, a $200,000 game could take 3 or 4 years. Yeah. And, people's lives, people can get divorced by then. Their lives are totally different. They're like, what is this? I don't remember backing this.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally true. That's totally true. So I want to talk a little bit about like, you're obviously, I think, like a first-time Kickstarter creator.
Yeah.
And from the stories that I've listened to, you often, a lot of people either like they underestimate how much work it takes for one, and they're also not really that familiar with like how to really approach it. So how did you go about kind of learning about what you need to do to do your Kickstarter, and then how did you kind of go about implementing all that necessary preparation?
Well, it takes time. It did. I expected it to take a lot of time, and it took more time than I expected, and it still is. It's a full-time job running a Kickstarter. It feels like, but I did have help with this as well. my brother ran a couple of successful Kickstarters for board games.
Cool.
So he knew the ropes and kind of what the steps were, what needs to be done, what works and what doesn't. For the most part, it's different audiences, but it was definitely helpful to have his advice. And I guess to pass that advice down, I think my advice would be keep it simple, but keep it interesting. There's a lot of Kickstarters with a lot of complexity and, a list of 50 stretch goals and stuff like that, different pledge levels with plushy toys and stickers and stuff. But then you end up spending all your time trying to, get stickers printed and things like that.
Did you go 100% digital?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, that's smart, I think.
I want to focus my time on developing the game, and as much as I would love to have, I would really like to have a printed book, and maybe I can do that at some point. Like, I really wanted to create a user manual that, like in the 90s, when you buy a video game, it comes with this, little book about how to play and what's in it.
I miss the physical aspects of gaming. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the benefit of that kind of doesn't outweigh the effort it would take and the costs.
That's a great assessment. Yeah, like, can you tell us a little bit about how you came up with that number? You're raising $15,000 USD.
Yeah.
So tell us about why was that the right number?
Well, I hope it was the right number.
Right.
But I wanted to. It's a balance, isn't it? Because I am on my own, so I can't really shoot for $1 million game. It's my first project, so there's some risk there as well. And I wanted to create. I don't know. I wanted to set a number that was reasonable, but not cheap either. I didn't want to cut myself short and seem like this is, not a fully thought out idea.
Yeah.
So I ended up on 15,000. I was kind of debating somewhere between 12 and 20. So I went with 15. And then the cost of the game itself is $15, which is a little bit, I know it's a little bit on the high side for indie games, but just the amount of work that goes into it, I think it's well worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, like you said, it's important not to cut yourself too short. And I think that $15 I don't think is necessarily a lot for an indie game. But
yeah, if you balance it out, like, that's a burrito and a movie, which is about 3 hours of enjoyment, which you could definitely get from more than that from a video game.
Yeah, I agree. You got to put it into perspective. One thing I thought was really interesting when reading through your Kickstarter comments, actually, was someone mentioned a concern about cultural appropriation, culture in your game, because obviously it's a tribal game. I thought that was really interesting, and I was wondering if you could kind of talk about maybe some of the challenges when you're making a game where some players may raise this concern, and how you're kind of approaching it and trying to solve it. Yeah,
this is a tricky issue. This is something I've been struggling with for a long time, ever since the game's conception. And my approach to it is to try to mix the worlds, or use inspiration from world cultures everywhere without singling one out, to try to avoid any kind of direct identification. And my other approach is to show the power of each of the cultures. There's no degrading in any way of any of the cultural aspects in the game. It's all about showing how good and the benefit of being different in my way. That's kind of the point of the game in one way. This is a tricky issue, and I think this is going to be something that's eventually may cause some problems down the line. And me being a white male, it's a bit of a hard thing to say that I'm an expert at it, which I'm not. So down the line, I do plan on hiring a cultural consultant, which is a position that I recently learned was a thing, to kind of look over it and pick out what might be offensive and try to adjust it so it's not that way.
That's really interesting.
For example, a lot of movies from the 90s or 80s would not be accepted nowadays.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. Yeah.
And games as well. But a lot of modern movies and games do have a lot of cultural influences, and the way that they do it is in a positive manner. But I don't know. I don't want to single anything out. But yeah, it is a hot topic, and I'm. It's going to be a rocky road, but I'm really trying my best to try to create something that's fun and interesting, that blends the world's cultures rather than isolates them.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's like some of the things that as an outsider who might not really like think about it all day, or a game developer who's maybe not developing this kind of game, it's something that is definitely important, but not really that obvious to think about as well.
Yeah.
How are you kind of like approaching marketing Kickstarter and getting the word out about it? Like, has that been something that you've been thinking about actively?
Yeah, it's a big part. I am just posting on Twitter for the most part, and then Reddit. Twitter is very open to random postings, but Twitter cycles very quickly. I also post on Reddit, but it's very difficult, I think, to strike gold on Reddit, which because Reddit's such a platform that is anti-advertising, which is great. It's one of the benefits, one of the reasons why I like it. And so if you're, even if you're posting about your Kickstarter, that's a form of advertising in a way. So once people catch on to that, they're like, okay, what is this? We don't want that here. So it is a bit tricky. I thought about Facebook, but I just really don't like Facebook, and I don't want to get myself involved in that. So I did not push for Facebook. But I'm not doing any paid ads or anything. And the last angle, which is probably the most beneficial for me at the moment, is I handed the game out to a few Let's Players.
Yeah.
And just a few, and they tried it out and posted a couple videos, and the audience that sees those videos is a lot larger than the audience I could ever reach.
How's that been like distributing? How have you approached like distributing your game? Like, how did you choose the influencers? How did you get in touch with them?
Yeah, I chose Let's Players who played similar games, obviously. So I just kind of thought of games that were base building games or ancient civilization type games, and also indie games, most importantly, and reached out to them that way. And then I contacted them like regular people, and they responded. But I think the key was having a playable build as well. Yeah. Like I said before, I think a lot of Kickstarters don't have a playable game when they launch on Kickstarter. But having that playable version, which was interesting, caught their attention. Cool
advice there, I think. So thanks for sharing all of that.
Yeah, they've been super nice about it. I'm really delighted with the response.
So it's already playable on when you go on the Kickstarter page. You can just download it and give it a go.
You cannot. No, I created a build for them, which was kind of a planned experience in a way, but it'll be available for Kickstarter backers in July in a beta. And then if backers don't want to participate in the beta, which is fine. I mean, it's an unfinished game, so it has issues. They'll be able to play the early access release in the fall, which is not too far away.
Yeah, it's not. That's awesome.
So I better get.
There's a lot of pressures on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's one thing that just work on your own project alone in your house, and then now I've got hundreds of people with
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah, actual customers. So
Yeah.
I mean, that also, I'm sure that feels great as well.
Yeah,
You
it
should get
does.
excited when you got your first backers or customers, like people wanting to pay and play your game.
Yeah, it's just great to see so many people excited about it. Like, it's just something that I kind of thought up on my own, and then people around the world are excited to play, and that's it's fantastic. It's like a dream come true. If my little game can bring, enjoyment to somebody on the other side of the world, I've succeeded.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, thanks for your time. I think it's good to like now's a good point to kind of wrap it up. So like as like a last piece of advice for any budding game developer, what would be like your like biggest lesson from this journey to for Kainga so far?
I think it may sound cliche, but I would say never give up. Just because it's like the only reason why I've gone this far is because of persistence and not stopping when when all signs pointed in other directions. Just keep on going a little bit at a time, and then eventually it all came together. Yeah.
Awesome advice. So everyone should check out the Kainga Kickstarter. It's going on right now.
Yeah.
Head down. And is there any other place that people should check out Kainga or follow you?
Yeah, I think you can follow me on Twitter at Kainga Game.
Mm-hmm.
And the Steam page also has a wealth of information. But I really, if you're looking for information about the game, Kickstarter has it all. I really put a lot into it. So check it out. And yeah, see if it's for you.
Awesome. It's been great. Thanks, Erik.
Yeah, thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Hey guys, Mark here from Moonlight Game Devs. Just a quick reminder, if you enjoyed the episode, please consider leaving a like or subscribing, whatever platform you're listening to. It really helps me out a lot. It shows me that you guys like the content. And hopefully you guys have a great week.